Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Surface, where we go beyond the highlights and talk about real stories people don't really see. I'll be your host, DJ Lester, and today we're diving into something real special. We have a special guest with us today, Coach Russell. So, for most of you guys don't know, Coach Russell, do you mind just introducing yourself, please, and thank you.
Yeah, no worries. My name's Sam Russell. I live here in Banff, Utah. I met DJ through a unique coaching experience. So that was probably 23 years ago, roughly.
Crazy, right? Crazy how time goes by, man. It's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. So, can you talk to us about your background, where you grew up, and what your early life was like?
Sure. So I was born in Chicago, actually. My dad was a detective there on the south side of Chicago and had been, I think he had 15 years in and decided the city was just getting too bad. So he moved our family to Utah, where his sister had migrated to quite a few years before. And that's how I wound up in Utah. Grew up down in Rose Park in Salt Lake, which at the time was a great neighborhood for Salt Lake City. It was, probably the roughest neighborhood, but rough being nothing.
Yeah.
None had that reputation being on the west side of Salt Lake. So anyway, like most kids, started playing football, basketball, baseball when I was young. I think when I was 11, one of my little league coaches is eventually who got me into coaching at 11.
Okay, so that kind of explains like the kind of next question I had, how you got into coaching, but you just kind of answered that question. So is that
Yeah,
how you
well,
fell in love with the game?
yeah. So what happened there was he was 12 years older than me. And later in life, when I was 18, we reconnected and we had a mutual love of fishing and we started hunting and fishing again together. And then at the time, he was working his way up the corporate ladder with J.C. Penney Corp as a financial officer. And they had an office here in Utah. Anyway, so he decided he was going to go coach Little League football again out here in Bountiful. And he asked me if I wanted to be an assistant. And I said, sure. So this was my very first time coaching. And then after that first season, and there's another story to that, but after that first season, he got transferred back to Dallas. But the president of the league asked me if I would stay on and be the head coach and take the team again the next year, which I did. And then I wound up coaching for 5 more years.
Yeah, so that's how everything kind of build off each other. That's
Yeah.
very unique.
So yeah, I didn't have any kids. I was 20, I think, at the time when I first started, or 21. I don't remember exactly, but yeah. So I just coached. I loved it. I loved working with the kids, and I was going to tell you, one of the kids that first year I coached, I wound up hiring him 4 years later. And then when I left and
Crazy.
opened up my place in '91, you know him, Coach Harris, Ryan Harris.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
worked for me. Yeah, I first met him when he was 12 on my little league team, and he worked for me for 30 years, and he's still a good friend, like a son to me. He
Yeah,
built a
that's
lot.
crazy. Like I said,
Yeah,
yeah, it's crazy putting all the pieces together now, you know what I mean? And seeing how
yeah.
all the dots connect backwards and all that stuff like that. Okay. So what did your childhood look like, your journey look like before people started recognizing who you are as a person?
Well, like I said, I grew up, had a great family life. I loved sports. I played 3 sports: football, basketball, baseball. Basketball was probably my least favorite, although I did play in high school for a couple years, and then I quit going out for after my sophomore year and focused on football. Baseball, my dad loved to hunt and fish. He was not a cop in Utah because they didn't make any money, but the police force in Chicago they were Teamsters Union. So when he moved to Utah, he wanted to keep his pension going with the Teamsters Union, his seniority, I should say. So he took a job working for Wonder Bread because they were Teamsters, and he ultimately wound up retiring, putting his years together from the Chicago police force with out here being working for Wonder Bread, and retired with a Teamsters pension when he eventually retired. So I grew up like a lot of kids. I had a great childhood. I think I was a pretty decent athlete. I had a few scholarships offers out of high school, baseball and football. Nothing I wanted to take. I was maybe burnt out or just didn't see a future in it or whatever. And just that was my last play. I played rec softball, but high school was where my career ended as far as any sort of organized football or baseball or that type. I
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
had a
Thanks for
West Point and I turned that down.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those insights, man. Seriously, it's crazy to kind of see the backdrop. The next thing I have, so a lot of people see the coach, right? But they don't always see the journey behind it. So to kind of ask, what is something you went through that people wouldn't know just by looking at you today?
Like everybody, you have your trials and tribulations. I'll tell you a story. to kind of get an idea of the background that I had as a kid or the way I was raised as a kid, we were raised in a different era. Things weren't like they are today. So that first year I played Little League football, one of our coaches, the one guy was a guy by the name of Mike Rich, which I told you about, wound up being a lifelong friend. Anyhow, there's another guy that was one of our coaches. He owned a racetrack out by the Great Salt Lake called Rocky Mountain Raceway. They ran car races season. And anyhow, they had a big Friday night race. And then Saturday, he wanted to take 5 or 6 kids out to clean up underneath the stands as a fundraiser. And then he'd pay some money back towards the league for our uniforms and whatever. So I went along with the 4 other guys, kids. I was 11. The other kids were 13 because I was such a big kid. I had to play 2 years up. They did it different. Then they did it by weight, not by age. Anyway, so I remember it was in August and it was hotter than hell. We went out and cleaned up underneath the stands and I think I found a couple dollars or whatever in my pocket. The coach had one of these old time pickup truck shells. Used to make them. They had like a regular door on the back, but you'd close the door and then you'd close the tailgate behind it. So once the tailgate was closed, you couldn't open the door. Yeah. So we rode in the back. Well, we're coming back and they stopped off at a bar to have a beer and left us in the back of the truck. And the bar they went to was probably about 2.5 miles from where we lived. So we're sitting out in this parking lot at 2:00 in the afternoon in August, locked in the back of this pickup truck while the coaches are inside having a couple pitchers of beer. After about 20 minutes, somebody came out of the bar and was walking across the parking lot, and we beat on the windows, and he came over and dropped the tailgate, opened the door. We hopped out and walked home. So, if you did that today, the parents would kill you. You'd be whatever. But we never said anything to our parents. We never said a word to them because, it's just not what you did. You didn't rat. You didn't tell, did it. And so we go home, and then Monday we show up to practice and we're standing there talking and kind of laughing about it. And he showed up and we were standing there joking. He looked at us and he said, well, I see you little assholes made it home eventually. He goes, but since you guys like to walk so much, why don't we start out by running around the park? He didn't think anything of it, man. Then we just he ran us to death for jumping out of the back of the truck and walking home, like it was our fault.
Different times. Yeah, different times I tell you.
So, but that was kind of that tough mentality that they had back then. And a lot of the stereotypes you see of the old time Little League coaches, smoking a cigarette and getting in the kids' faces and yelling at them. And I didn't necessarily like that approach, but, part of it I could see some value. It just made you tough, And so when I started coaching Little League myself out here in Bountiful, well, Bountiful, Utah is way different than Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah.
And so we had to dial it way back. And I think we did a better job with the kids, keeping with them and trying to build them up rather than try to make them tougher by tearing them down. And that's always been kind of my philosophy. I want to build kids, young men up. I'm going to get on you when you do something wrong, but for every one time you do something wrong, I'm going to 10 times tell you what you did right. Cause that's just what I believe. I'm not kids need somebody there for them that is a positive environment. They got to learn what they got to learn, but you want to do so in a way that doesn't tear kids down, and that kids at that age, a million emotions, a million things going on.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I said, yeah, different.
So growing up in that type of environment, my dad was this ex-Chicago cop, had a pretty crazy view of the world, very paranoid, carried a gun with him all the time, So that, but it was a good life and I loved it and went on to work in the car business, as you know, and then opened up my place and eventually wound up being at Christian Life Center, which is the church attached to the school where I first started coaching high school football.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that here in a little bit too as well. And it's that's kind of one of the most intricate parts of the story as well too. Sure, and we get into that here shortly. So thanks for sharing that. Obviously, the next thing is what was the toughest moment in your life or career, you could say, or do you have a particular moment that you can say was a toughest moment?
If I can, in 1984, I believe it was, my brother had moved back to Washington, D.C. with his life partner. My brother was gay, and which was fine. We accepted him and loved him, and I didn't think any different of him at all. And the 80s, for a lot of people that maybe hear this will remember, that's when the AIDS epidemic, I should say, broke free. And he called in 84 and his partner had been diagnosed with AIDS and he was living back in Washington at the time. Obviously he was scared to death. And a lot of people don't really understand AIDS or how it works, but the virus that causes it is the HIV virus. And you can contract the HIV virus without having full blown AIDS. So, and some people get the HIV virus and never really have the AIDS portion of it. They just become a carrier or whatever of the virus. But nonetheless, he had to get tested. And back then, the test results took probably 2 or 3 weeks to come back. And so he called and was scared, and his partner was in the hospital with a form of pneumonia, this pneumocystis pneumonia, which is really nasty stuff. It's opposite of, it dries your lung out as opposed to other pneumonia fills your lungs with fluid. Anyway, he wanted my mom to come back, or my dad or somebody be with him when he got his test results and figure out what he needed to do. And so my mom and dad asked me if I was in a position to go back with them, and with my mom, and I was. So being in that office and hearing the doctor come in and tell my brother he was HIV positive, and seeing the reaction that had on my mom's face, that was pretty tough time.
Yeah.
And then in 1987, we got a call from him saying that he was in the hospital and he had contracted a disease that you only get if you have AIDS. And he wound up dying eventually in 1991 from that. Really horrible disease. It was a horrible time, in America. They didn't, people were scrambling, trying to figure out if there was a cure and how to save people's lives. And so he was actually, being in Washington, D.C. in the beginning, he was the benefactor of some breakthrough drug trials that they still use today. So maybe that's the blessing of the whole thing, that he was able to be a guinea pig for some of these concoctions they eventually came up with help, which helped prolong some people's lives, and now they can actually control and manage it. So
Yeah, that sounds like something tough.
Pretty traumatic to me, losing my brother, 4 years older than me, and seeing the pain and the stress that it cost my parents, the grief it cost my parents.
Yeah, that's definitely something a lot, losing obviously a brother or family member or somebody close. That's something very devastating, like I've shared that experience as well too. So we can definitely test for that.
It gives you the perspective of, getting your life prioritized, living, looking more for trying to take advantage of most of your life, not wasting time, realizing how quickly your fortune can change, how quickly life waits. That kind of gave me that perspective.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like life kind of throws these curveball at us to kind of put us on a straight path. Obviously, sometimes it hurts a little bit more than usual. But yeah, so thanks for sharing that for sure, most definitely. And would you say like that was I guess one of like the toughest things you went through? Like what made you question everything? Would you say that?
Well, yeah, you there's you're gonna always have challenges in life, that change is inevitable, and challenges come, and I think they're what make you who you are, and then you'll have some good times. You're always going to have, I went through a divorce, and that was tough. Got remarried to the most wonderful person in the world, and so maybe that was the blessing I was supposed to receive. Financial hardships, I've had my share.
Yeah.
Just a lot of things come at you over the course of 63 years. Not so much when you're little. When you're a little kid, you just kind of play and have fun, and the world serious, but then as you start getting into high school and your eyes get open more, and then get out on your own, you begin to see, how serious it is. 10 years, well, let me see, in 2016, my mother died. And a year and a half later, in 2017, dad died. So I've been without my parents now for 9 years, which I think threw me for a loop. I sold the dealership in shortly after my dad's death, and I think I went into a depression for a few months then. I really do. I'm not a depressed person. I'm usually pretty upbeat, pretty strong, be able to push myself forward. But I think that kind of, all of that hitting at once kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah. What would you say, what got you through those times? And then who would be somebody you feel like helped you throughout those times? They helped you push through?
Well, it's a good question. My parents weren't religious people at all when I was little. And I was confused, although maybe I didn't know it at the time that I was confused about it, but I didn't understand the difference between being not religious and whether or not you believe in God. And you don't have to be a religious person to believe in God. So I always felt like maybe my parents didn't believe in God because they just didn't believe in religion. As I got older and began to understand that you can believe in God and you can believe in Christ as your savior without following a religion, without being a Catholic or a Mormon or a Assembly of God or whatever. You don't need to have that organization in your life in order to develop a relationship with God. But when I was a little kid, because I wasn't exposed to any religion, or the predominant religion here was Mormon, I should say, but we weren't. But I found I believed in God, and I started praying on my own, no prompting at all. I think when I was 7 years old, and still do every night to before I go to bed. It's just a habit I developed on my own, and so I think that's always been something that's been good for me at the end of the day, to pray, to dump some of those emotions out and clean my slate for the next day.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes we need that too as well. Like you said there, not everybody believes, that you need Christ. We're not, some people do, some people don't, right? But that's a personal choice. But like I said, I'm glad you kind of found light in that darkness. So I guess
Yeah.
the other question I have is in that moment, what do you feel like that kind of taught you from those experiences you was going through at the time?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story about that. So in 1987, I believe it was, with my brother now being diagnosed with AIDS, being sick, I should say, from AIDS. We knew he was HIV positive, but now actually being ill and in the hospital back in Washington. I had had some financial problems. I had recently gone through my party days and put some of that behind me, but still it seemed tough at the time. I remember praying when I went to bed, because it seemed like I was frustrated and that my prayers maybe weren't being answered. So I remember going to bed and praying that, God, I don't know if you hear me. I'm struggling. I need some help. I just do. I pray to you every night, but I don't feel like you listen. Okay. Well, in the middle of the night, now I've never read a Bible up to this point. I don't know anything about a Bible. Page 1007, however many pages there, I didn't know anything about it. What the books were, I didn't know anything. I knew my name, Samuel, was a biblical character. I knew that much,
Uh-huh.
but that was it. Anyway, so I woke up in the middle of the night where I was having whatever. There was this figure sitting on the chest, and the figure told me to read the 40th Psalm and it would all be clear to me. And I don't know what that is. And they said, just read the 40th Psalm. And then I woke up and I was by myself and I was like, what the heck was that? Well, when I got to work the next morning at 9, I called my aunt. We didn't have cell phones back then, right? I called my
Uh-huh.
aunt, who was a religious, said, hey, I said, what is a psalm? They said to read the 40th Psalm. She goes, who said to read that? I said, told her. She goes, oh my gosh, hold on. She goes, so she went and got the Bible and came back. She goes, well, the Psalm is a book in the Bible. And when she said that, kind of got chills. The hair stood up on my arms, And I said, well, read it to me. And I don't have it in front of me, but I have enough memorized to paraphrase it. It said, the first line says, I waited patiently for the Lord and he heard me cry. He lifted me up out of the pit of destruction and put my feet upon firm settings. And kind of was like, whoa,
Powerful.
he's hearing me. He's going to lift me up. He's going to help me out. And then it goes on to say, blessed is the man who makes the Lord his trust. And so it really, I don't know, from that day forward, I kind of knew that I was going to get through everything, and I had God on my side, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad, like I say, you stuck through it, because that kind of correlates to what I was gonna just tell you. Like, what I'm saying? What you don't understand is like, you probably don't even realize the impact you had when you first even like started a football program at LCA, Lane Christian Academy, Christian Life
Yeah.
Center. That kind of made an impact. So all the things you went through and then kind of started that football program, you don't realize the impact you kind of had on a lot of us. For a lot of us, like I said, it felt like a last chance you for us. I was coming back from Nigeria being kidnapped. I missed 3 months of my freshman year in high school. I came back like late October, and just a conversation you had with my mother at the time, and for us to play football, like you don't realize the impact that had on a lot of us. Because to me, like I was being labeled stupid, dumb, going through foster care, bouncing home to home, not fitting in. So like that kind of gave me an outlet, to kind of get my anger out, and just like the conversation we had. And even though you talk about the car dealership, you open up the doors to let us watch cars on Saturdays. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so all those things exist. So I just want to let you know, like, you really made an impact, So when you started that program, what was your vision for all of us and for you starting that program that freshman year?
Well, let me take you back just a couple years before that. The program was started in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember the year or not, but it was 2003.
Yep.
I think in '01 it was, so 2 years prior. I came out of church one Sunday up there at Christian Life Center, and the school administrator, Mr. Miller, grabbed me and said, "Hey, Sam," he said, "I know you love to golf. We need a golf coach. Would you be willing to help us?" And I started laughing. I said, "You got the wrong guy." I said, "I'm not. I like to play golf, but I am not a golf coach. You need to find somebody that knows how to golf and teach kids." He goes, "No, I heard you were a pretty good golfer." I said, "Well, I don't know how to coach. Sorry." I said, "I'll tell you what." Just maybe even trying to put the conversation off. I said, "I'll tell you what, you ever get a football team?" Come look me, kind of laughing, shook hands, walked away. 2 years later, I'm at the dealership. I'm up front and I see Mr. Miller and Bobby Porter, athletic director, pulling in the parking lot. I'm thinking, I wonder what these guys are up to. And they got out of the car, and then Bobby walked up to that big old smile of his and stuck out that size mitt. And he goes, "I want to shake the hand of the first head coach of Leighton Cruson Academy football." And I went, "What?" And Greg goes, "I never forgot when you said if I ever needed a football coach." Looked up and goes, "Well, we're going to start a football program. I can be the head coach." And anyway, but I accepted and did it. And I didn't realize, I don't think I realized what it meant to start a program. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most head coaches go to a school that's been playing football for 30 or 40 years, whatever. And yeah, they make a program their own, but they already have a field, they have equipment, they have locker rooms, they have all
Yeah.
the systems in place and all these traditions in place. And they're already plugged into the high school activity association, and they have schedules made for them by athletic directors and all this kind of stuff, right? Well, I didn't realize how nothing we had, because we had nothing. And I had to start, and I didn't really know how to do that, but I learned, we started off by getting uniforms, practice uniforms, and then we
Yeah.
picked game uniforms, and we had to find a place to practice, and we had to start trying to figure out how to put a team together, and all these things. And I'll never forget, we had our first conditioning practice, and I think it was in July, just because I think we got started late, but it was all we could do. And had it over at Leighton High School, west of the stadium there. And
Yeah.
and I'll never forget, me and Coach Steele, Gary Steele there, and we had 6 kids show up. One of them had on a pair of athletic shorts and some shoes. One kid showed up in boat shoes and a tank top with checkered shorts. The other kid showed up in flip flops. They had I was looking at
Yeah.
my, what did we get ourselves? Anyway, then the next conditioning practice, I think I had 9 kids, and by now they had got the word, you're coming there, have the right attire on, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then pretty soon I had 12 kids, and then some more kids came back on vacation. Then we had 15 kids, we had 18 kids, but they didn't know how to play football. A couple of them knew how to play football, but some of them have never played football in their life, ever.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had a few. Ben Purdy, if you remember Ben.
Yeah. Good have been it.
And
Yeah.
Adam Jones played
Yeah.
football.
Jonesy.
So we had a few guys that had played, and that kind of helped me. And then I had a roster. I think you and I talked about this the other day. I had a roster of kids that I should get a hold of about playing football, and your name was on it. And I called, and I think I had to call 2 or 3 times, and nobody answered. And finally answered an older woman, which I come to learn at the time. You were a foster child at the time. I thought it was your mother or grandmother, whoever I was talking to.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, coach, he's not here. He's on vacation." I told you that because he sure does love to play that football. He loves to play that football. Man, he loves to play that football. As soon as he gets here, I'll tell him, coach, I'll tell him he's going to love to play football. I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I need him. I need him." And I kept hearing about this athlete, this DJ Lester. They kept telling me, "Man, this guy is an athlete." Bobby Porter's telling me he'll be here. He'll be here. This kid is just, he's a good athlete. You're going to really like it when he gets there. Then within a week or 2, we started learning everything that was going on and what was happening with you, and et cetera. So that's kind of how we kicked off the LCA football program. I had a truck that was my office. I always joked about it being my office, but all the equipment there, I had to pay, which I didn't have to. Let me back up. I don't only want to say I had to. I willingly bought all the uniforms, helmets, shoulder pads, paid for all the tackling, everything that just you don't have, nothing. Footballs.
Yeah.
Come on, elementary stuff, footballs, kicking.
Yeah.
And we had, I think Mr. Miller and Bobby Porter worked on it for us. The High School Activities Association dictates your first year when you first declare that you're going to play football, you have to play what they call a JV schedule. And
Yeah.
so I think they got us scheduled for 8 games somehow, playing against
Yeah.
a JV team. We were 1A, if you remember, and I don't know, people watching this, 1A is the smallest division in Utah.
Yeah.
And so our closest away game was a 2.5-hour drive. That was up at Rich High. That was our closest away game. But because most teams already had their schedules at the time, we were able to put together some makeshift teams against some larger schools, but against their sophomore teams like Ogden High, if you remember, and
Yep.
uh, uh, Juan Diego, which was state champ, Enterprise, which was a 2A state champ. And so it was a challenging schedule, and we were supposedly playing their junior varsity, but as it turned out, I don't think we were, because as soon as we
Nah.
went in, they put the kids in to try to beat us.
Yeah. Yeah. I sure remember all that.
So we had no home games that first year or second year. In fact, I don't think that. Well, yeah, I did. I think my last year we got to have home games. I think the
Yeah.
last
That's what.
first year we had, which was interesting. I had to hire an engineering to come in and lay out the football field so we
Yeah.
could get the goalpost put in. But it was really fun, rewarding experience. It was a cool time. I really enjoyed that time that I had there. And for people who knows coaching, I also car dealerships run. So my typical day would be I'd go to the dealership at 9 o'clock in the morning, leave at 3:30, go up to practice for 2 or 3 hours, then go home and then do it all over again. And during the summer, we started doing 2-a-days for that last week before practice. And so I kind of work a little bit, but I had a pretty good crew of guys. And again, one of the guys that coached that first year was Ryan Harris, this kid I spoke of that I coached. He was 11, wound up hiring him, and he worked years.
Yeah.
That's how we launched the whole Layton Christian Academy football program. And after 4 seasons, I went to the head pastor and Bobby and the administrator and said, "Hey, look, I think I've taken the team as far as I'm capable of. I don't know that I can do anything else." I said, I think somebody needs to be at the school all day, plugged into the school, working with the kids, helping get other kids here, helping build the program. I said, a part-time attitude's not going to do it anymore. And I brought in a coach.
Like I said, I remember that like yesterday. And to me, from my perspective, I was like, man, like, because you had built a program. I was going through a lot of stuff, had a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, was trying to figure out life. I just found out I lost my mom when I was back in Nigeria. And then I came back, lost Miss Willander, that freshman year again, the second half. And so it was like a lot of stuff was happening. So when you left, I was like, man, like I just had somebody I can kind of pour into. That was like pouring into me and stuff like that or whatever. So that's kind of what I learned. I was like, man, like when you left, I was like, okay, I got to reset and refocus again. You know what I mean? It was like another challenge, another roadblock ahead. But like I said, I just faced a challenge and say, hey, I got to keep being persistent, keep pressing forward. But we stay connected outside of that as well.
You still worked for me.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, I was still working on Saturdays for Washington and stuff like that. So at the time, what did you see in us that we didn't see for ourselves?
If you do it right as a coach, in my opinion, it's about mentoring more so even than the X's and O's. And you get inside kids' lives a little bit, You're not their parent, but in a way you have a little bit of that role. Each one of them's different. And you see, like you said, you see some young men trying to figure life out, coming from different backgrounds. We were it was a private school. And so you had some kids whose parents had money and some kids whose parents didn't have money that were there. Being a Christian school, it was a missionary, I guess would be the best way to put it, was an outreach. So we would help kids that were getting off track, that were maybe at the end of the rope, like you said, last chance you, kids that were going to maybe fall through the cracks over at one of the public schools. And those principals would call our school and say, hey, I got a kid. I think he's a good kid. Maybe you guys can help him. And they'd bring him over. And of course, through sports is one way, but other programs, they're a wonderful thing to help kids gain, confidence, gain a way to channel emotions, a way to learn a work ethic. There was a study done, and they found that the 2 greatest challenges facing teenagers is disposable income and disposable time. And, so people think they look at poor schools thinking, oh my gosh, this must be drugs, etc. Well, that's not the case because they can't afford drugs.
Hmm.
The rich
Yeah.
kids get drugs, and I'm not trying to stereotype anybody, but the rich schools have different problems than necessarily the poor schools have. But the one thing that all of them share in common is there's too much time. So when you get kids involved in extracurricular activities, football or baseball or basketball or band or soccer or debate, it helps tie up that extra time. It helps keep them from wandering mentally into an area that's going to get them into trouble. And I always took the approach with you guys, and even now I'm coaching again, as you know.
Hmm.
If you got a problem, I want to talk to you and I want to help you if I can. It's not just I'm going to coach you and send you home. And
Yeah.
it takes a bit of a toll on you, but I think it's rewarding to me to have to work with kids and see them grow and see them respond. And then they come back to you later in life and talk about how you impacted their life like we're doing now. And that's rewarding. I
Yeah.
think that ultimate prize over any championship or any game you could win, winning at the game of life, I guess, to not sound too cliche or corny.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, with that being said, can you summarize what type of coach you try to be, and then what did you try to have your players kind of instill in your players basically when you were coaching?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. Coaching, there's some aspects of coaching that, as you've probably found, you've heard the same thing from me or from Coach Porter in basketball or whoever, or when you went on to play college. There's some things that all coaches try to instill in terms of work ethic, hard work, teamwork, all these kind of things that I believe those sports bring. And I've seen it in my daughters. My daughters both did competitive cheerleading, and they learned so much in terms of teamwork, in terms of hard work, dedication, all these things that they apply personal life, their business life. They've learned those habits, I should say, became ingrained in them. So as a coach, you try your best to teach kids to think as one, to understand a lot about life, the parallels, I guess, in life between sports and real life. And I told you earlier, I don't try to teach, I don't try to coach from a position of negativity. I don't believe if you run a play and you screw up, I'm going to tell you you did it wrong. But for every time I'm going to tell you you did it wrong, there's going to be 10 times I'm going to tell you when you did it right, because I don't believe in tearing down. I just
Yeah.
there's a lesson there, DJ, because you can't make yourself taller by tearing somebody else down and standing on their back. It does.
Most definitely.
You can't make yourself a better person by making someone a lesser person.
Yeah.
And that's it's not my practice in my personal life, in my coaching life. I just I don't believe in it. Kids have enough pressure on them. They're dealing with all kinds of things. It doesn't seem big now that you're an adult, but you got to understand those little things in their lives at the time are huge to kids.
Hmm.
And when I say kids, I'm talking about high school on down.
Yeah.
You always have to keep that in mind. And I think you always have to be open. And I always told parents, I always had a meeting at the start of the year, that I'm always happy to talk to them about whatever they want to talk about. It can be football related or not football related, but it has to be before practice or after practice. During practice, I have an
Practice
obligation,
time.
not kid, but other 26, and we have to set them up during practice. And that, if they want to talk to me, I'll listen or help in any way that I possibly can. And I say that, and I think you saw that. It's not just something I flap my jaw on. I'm sincere. I follow through on it. And I
Hmm.
think the part that kids need, they pick up on it, and they know that that's sincere, and they know that if they have a problem, even later in life, they can call me. They got somewhere to go, and somebody will give them advice. Well, my
Yeah.
wife,
Thanks for the insights.
we would do, if a kid needed help, would help him any way we could.
Yeah, like I said, I've always known that about you, and that's why I said that's one thing I always appreciate about you, because you opened up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities for all of us that kind of went through LCA and whatnot too. So just kind of tell you made an impact in that accord. So from your perspective too, what do you feel like separates a good athlete from a great athlete mentally?
Well, there's no doubt about it. It's an attitude. It's the willingness to work harder than anybody else. Not as hard as somebody else, but the willingness to work harder than anybody else. the willingness to work on your own, to work on your own skills on your own time. Anybody can show up to practice and do what the coach asks during practice, then take their uniform off and go play video games, run around the ball, or go to a movie or do whatever. The kids that become great athletes, great performers, and go on to be really successful are the ones that work beyond that. I was just listening to a story today about the great Michael Jordan, and one of his coaches, or maybe it was his first coach when he was in college, he asked him what he wanted to be, and I want to be the greatest basketball player.
Mhm.
And well, how are you going to go about doing that? Well, I'm going to work as hard as everybody. Well, wait a minute, that's not the greatest player in North Carolina. You got to work harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
And in his freshman year, he weighed like 210 pounds, whatever it was, ran a 4.5 40. And then they had that conversation, and that must have struck something. Okay, fine, then work harder than everybody else. And the next year, when he came back and did the same test, he had gained 20 pounds, and now his 40 was down to 4.34. So not only did
Yeah.
he get bigger and prove that he's willing to work harder than that's
Thanks for the insights.
yeah, you can't get it done. You practice so much, coach. You can only do so much. And you got 26 kids on it, 30 kids you have. In 2 hours of practice, you got to see to it that everybody's plugged in and do what they need to do. And for a kid to go beyond that level, they've got to work on their own.
Yeah, most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of correlates to the next question I have. So as far as athletes now, obviously we grew up in a different era, like sports are transitioning in different perspectives, whatnot. Do you feel like athletes now need to hear more than ever that nobody's telling them?
Oh my gosh. Well, at the college level, for sure, I'm not a believer in the way this whole NIL money's coming down. I think that kids at age, I don't think their minds are developed enough for them to truly understand somebody stuffing $5 million in their hand. I think it sets an unrealistic picture of how life is going to be. It used to be when you were a kid, you worked hard, you played whatever your sport was, football, basketball, baseball, golf, soccer, whatever. And then if you were good enough and you kept your grades up, that was your incentive to get a college scholarship, college education. That was your reward. And then if you were good enough at that point, you might have a chance to play professional sports. Well, now these kids are getting so much money in college sports, it doesn't matter if they even go pro, or at least that's the mentality they're starting to
Yeah.
develop.
Yeah.
And I eventually it's hurt college sports. That's going to hurt professional sports. The amount of money thrown around is crazy. Caitlin Clark, the little gal from Iowa, which
Uh-huh.
because you're in my wife's family's off from Iowa, so it was a
Yeah.
big, and so I followed that. First year in the WNBA, she took a pay. She made more money her senior year at Iowa than she made her freshman year. So this WNBA, and that's kind of I think that's something that kids got to mindful for. And a lot of kids, especially a lot of the good athletes, they don't have the parents that either are around or capable of helping them with that. It's one thing to manage your life and manage what you have, but man, if you stuff $5 million in your pocket, that's tough to manage, especially if you don't have any money or a background or a family without a lot of money. That distorts your vision, distorts your view of how things should be. And I think to keep kids grounded, to keep their heads in the game, to keep them on straight, that's going to be a tough challenge.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's a big responsibility.
I think now high school kids are thinking like pro kids, not like college kids. Now high school kids are thinking, man, all I got to do is college and I'm going to make a boatload of money. The college used to be, I got to play hard in high school and then play hard in college. Then I'll get to the pros and make a boatload of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's a whole big
tough to.
Okay. Well, thanks for your insights on that. Okay. So what is something that people you feel like get wrong about success?
Get wrong about success is without question. People look at success. You've heard the term for an overnight success, right?
Yep.
Because it took me 10 years of working 80 hours a week to become overnight success. There is no success.
Yeah.
Every is out there that success. You would look at, you have So if you know somebody's successful and you see them, whether it's in TV or real life, and you know they're successful, then you should know that they work very hard to get there. It's not easy. And to stay successful. So, and secondly, when you find success, don't let it, be whether you got $20 million or $10, be the same person. Don't start thinking better than somebody else because you got a few dollars in your pocket, which happens. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Most
always,
definitely.
one thing my wife and I do, and we're a lot alike in this way. And my wife's been successful in her life. She was former Miss Iowa, had a 4-year scholarship to Performing Arts School, was big sis to Kristen Chenoweth, who is a major Broadway and film star now. She was her mentor when she was
Uh,
in college. And we just always believe that, we go to a restaurant, those people are working hard, they need to make a living. And we always believe tip well, you know, trying to, just always make sure people have a chance to make some money. It's
yeah.
at least that's the way I can't be all about yourself.
Yeah.
If you've been successful, then pass that around. Help other people. Take time like this to maybe spread some help, wisdom, some love, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And then the other question I have is, okay, so according to you, what does discipline look like day to day? And then when it's all said and done, what would you want your players to say about you?
So the first part was, what does discipline look like?
Yeah, day to day. Yep, day to day.
Well, discipline is what it is, right? I mean, discipline is self-governing. Is the motivation from within is discipline in a nutshell. The ability to say, okay, hey, tomorrow I've got to get this done and this done and this done and this done, and then doing it without somebody telling you have to. That's discipline. And discipline will, if you become a disciplined person, you'll go very far. Because most people aren't that disciplined. They allow themselves to sidetrack. Because on any
Yeah.
road, you think you can see clearly down the road, but you get halfway down and all of a sudden there's a wall in the way. Either around or through that wall. You're not just a person at that wall, right? So I think being disciplined and success, when you ask me about that, I'm going to go back, how do you define success? And I mean, really, what
Yeah.
is success? It's not just money. Success is, I think, peace, inner peace. Success is being happy and content in life, not where you've been, not necessarily dreaming about where you're going. Happy in the moment. Success. That person, the time to do what is success. If all you do is work, chase a dollar, and you never really get to do the things you want to do, I don't think that's a successful life. I used to always, and I shouldn't say always, but my brother loved the theater, loved it. And he was 4 years older than me. And back in those days, it certainly wasn't cool for boys to be into the theater at all or made fun of. Sure. Well, I know he was bullied. I helped him out, so backed him up on this. And I think that childhood that way, going to elementary school, because being in plays and music, singing, and back then, the mentality of boys back then, but he loved it so much. Scholarship across state, and then he went. He never made it. I mean, he was in some different productions, but nothing ever big enough to sustain him financially. But he wanted to stay associated with it, and so he began teaching high school, teaching speech and drama at high school, and he loved it. He would get up and go to school at 6 in the morning and make all the costumes and make all the scenery for the plays. He'd stay till 10 o'clock at night. He would work with the kids on his own time. He just loved it so much. And he looked forward to going to work every day. It was not work to him. He said that. He goes,
Yeah.
I love it. And he did it 365 days. And although he never made a lot of money,
Just loved it. Yeah.
to me, that's a
Yeah.
fulfilled life.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to digress. Anyway, so I think the second part of that question is what do I want the kids to
What do you want
remember?
your play? Yeah, to say about you or remember about you as a person.
Well, I just hope they realize that it's here that I'm trying more than just how to be disciplined and how to work their way through problems in life. And secondly, I want them to know that we're here for them. If something comes up down the road, and somebody to talk to, or they need a reference for a job or whatever that will be for them. It's not just, I'm going to coach you for a season and get the hell out of my life. So I want that. That's what I'd like players and their parents to remember about me.
Yeah, I think you got that from a lot of people. So as far as nowadays, with obviously you still coach a little bit or whatnot, but not just as a coach, what would you say the success looks like for you now, not just as a coach, but as a person as well on your day-to-day life, the things you do on a daily basis?
Being able to be a part of our kids, that both Jody and I, we love to be a part of our grandkids' lives, and along with that is our kids' life, right? But it's just really fun. It's a good, fun second chapter.
Yeah.
So we'd spend time traveling because it's a second marriage. Her family's in the West, so we have it's kind of spread out all around the country. We spend at least 1 week a month, if not more, somebody. So that to me, that's a successful day, right?
Yes,
I guess,
sir. Most definitely.
you never know. I'm 64. I like to go to the days a week,
Yeah.
try to stay in shape. I want to be able to push myself up out of my own chair when I'm 80 years old and be
Yeah.
able to. I've always said I don't. If I live 60 or 100, I just want quality of life.
Yeah.
Drinking, I told you, almost 4 years old.
Yeah.
Just trying to take better care of my health.
The little things, the little tweaks, right?
Actually, it's
So,
been me. But yeah,
yeah.
I got that was an eye opener.
Yeah.
I've never been.
Yeah, fine. Like I said, proud of you for that for sure, most definitely. And as far as the podcast, obviously the podcast was Beyond the Surface. So what does that mean to you, beyond the surface?
Well, beyond the surface would what it probably would mean about anybody. I mean, the surface is what most people gloss through in life, right? They just surface, and would name it beyond the surface. Didn't say beneath. On the surface can be beneath the surface, or it can be above the surface, right? It can be what you don't see in terms of what you don't see in people or what you don't see in life, or it can be what you want to see, what you're striving to be, or what your goals and your potential is beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Right? The surface is who you are and what you see. I do believe, you've heard this. A lot of people say, well, if you try really hard, you can. Well, that's true too. I mean, I can try as hard as I want, but I have to be able to play basketball.
Yeah.
But I can be a good version. You can do anything, be able to do it as well as somebody else. You work hard. That would be a little bit more than what you see.
Yes, most definitely. And that's kind of like the sole purpose of me kind of starting the podcast, you know what I'm saying? So I want to take time today to thank you, you know what I'm saying, taking time out your busy day to kind of be on the show, whatnot. So I just want to say, if this episode connected with you, share with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready for more real conversations, make sure you follow the podcast. This is Beyond the Surface, and we'll see you on next episode.
All right.